Hi, my name is Amit Banerjee. I'm a Group Program Manager with the SQL Server Product Group. I'm responsible for the database engine that runs inside SQL Server. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to actually take the high availability and disaster recovery benefits that we introduced in November 2019 and apply them to your SQL Server architectures running inside of Azure. So if you remember from our previous episodes, we said that you actually get a DR replica for free if you're running on Azure VM. And I'm just going to highlight that over here. And you also get a HA replica if you're running on an Azure Virtual Machine. In this episode, we're just going to restrict the architectures to SQL Server running in an Azure Virtual Machine. So let's take a scenario where you have a primary virtual machine running SQL. Let's say this has 32 vCores. And then you have another secondary, which is, let's say, the HA replica, and that also has 32 vCores. Now, in this scenario, you're actually taking advantage of, let's say, a feature like always-on availability groups to create the sync HA replica for you. With the benefit that you already had, you would not need to license for your SQL Server high availability replica if you have software assurance. So all these benefits actually require you to have software assurance, and with software assurance, you actually get these two benefits. And if you're running an Azure VM, you essentially are already using Azure as your disaster recovery site if you choose to add, let's say, another secondary replica. So the data replication happens in this manner from the primary, and in this scenario, let's say you have another 32 vCores starting with 2019 and starting from November 1st, you would not need to pay for these virtual cores as well. So your architecture now would look like, let's say you're in US East 2 data center and you are going to US West 2 as your DR site. So let's say in this environment, you have a primary virtual machine and you have a secondary virtual machine and you have another secondary virtual machine here. And let's say you are deploying a secondary HA replica in the primary site and you're deploying a DR replica in US West 2. And you will need, and each of these, in my previous example, I said 32, each of them have 32. The licenses that you would need to pay for is 32 for 32 virtual cores on the primary, the HA would be 0, and the DR would be 0 if you have software assurance. These are passive replicas, so you can actually, on the secondary replicas, you can run backups, you can do maintenance operations like check DBs, you can actually also let monitoring applications connect to them, and you can actually run DR drills on them as well. So if you need to break this environment and run a DR drill on this environment, you could do so for fixed periods of time, and you would not incur additional licensing costs for them. And the last scenario that this helps you get better TCO in the cloud is if you actually use this for any feature, like if you, for example, if you were using log shipping, or if you actually even used, in our example that we use always-on availability groups, or if you set up a simple backup and restore onto a secondary site, which is the US West 2 in my example, you would still be able to leverage the benefit because this would serve as the DR site. So as you can see here, by combining SQL Server features that SQL Server ships for high availability and disaster recovery, and by leveraging software assurance benefits, you're able to drive a very optimal architecture inside of Azure without having to pay for additional licenses and still keep your data highly available and safe. Thank you very much for joining this session, and look forward to driving more and more optimal architectures in Azure. Thanks.